Welcome to the Really Good Films Podcast, a chance to look back at the films we've reviewed recently, but also look forward to some of June's exciting new releases. First, let's recap the original review of each film, followed by additional commentary that may contain spoilers. Don't worry, you'll be warned before any spoilers in case you want to watch spoiler-free. The films we've covered recently have featured plenty of action, from Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre to Code 8, and our bonus indie feature, Translations, provided a nice contrast, some introspection after films of a more bombastic nature. Instead of the regular extra commentary on Translations, we've got something very exciting, an interview with its director, Keith Wilhelm Kopp. Now that you know what's coming up, let's get on with the show, and have a look at the original review of Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre. Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre sees Agent Orson Fortune and his team recruit a Hollywood star to aid them in an undercover mission when the sale of a deadly piece of technology threatens to disrupt world order. Operation Fortune is an action thriller with a comedic streak. It's filled with beautiful locations and an impressive cast. But despite the talent behind the film, it feels like it's on autopilot, with our leads never feeling challenged by what they face. The film fails to excite its viewers with action sequences that just aren't that fun to watch. It contains the clunkiest dialogue I've seen in a Guy Ritchie film, with jokes that frequently miss the mark. The film is never bad per se, just not great. Operation Fortune might be worth a watch if you want to turn your brain off for a bit, but for most, it's worth a skip. No spoilers for our extra commentary on Operation Fortune Ruse de Guerre, so no need to skip ahead. Here's some additional thoughts on the film. Operation Fortune's plot doesn't really deliver any surprises. The weaker jokes, in addition to not landing, occasionally feel the need to either explain themselves or stretch themselves out in the hope of an additional chuckle. This is a rare miss for Guy Ritchie, and for those who want to watch some of his better, somewhat recent work, check out The Gentleman or The Man from U.N.C.L.E., the latter of which I particularly enjoyed. Hopefully this extended review has given you an idea of why Operation Fortune is likely worth a skip. Now it's time to move on to the original review of Nobody. Nobody tells the story of a meek family man who reveals his true character after his house is burgled, which, coincidentally, leads him into a violent conflict with a Russian crime boss. Nobody is an action thriller that packs a satisfying punch. Bob Odenkirk proves a strong lead, being both intimidating and likeable. There are plenty of well-choreographed action sequences which are filmed for maximum teeth-clenching impact. The film alternates between dry humour and serious moments, with the balance for the majority of the film tipping a little too far to the serious side, considering the paper-thin plot. However, the film knows how to have fun and delivers a great finale. While not the most original film, Nobody serves up a polished and entertaining experience that is worth a watch. Here are some further thoughts on Nobody, with spoilers. If you want to watch without spoilers, skip ahead a bit to our next review. The level of damage characters take in Nobody is often ridiculous, but that's to be expected with films like this. It would have been nice to have seen more of Christopher Lloyd's father character. He is very enjoyable, and the actor is clearly having great fun. Hopefully there'll be a sequel that has more of the feel of the final act of this film, with lots of father and sons team-up action sequences. Nobody is one of those films where, if you enjoy the trailer, you are more or less guaranteed to enjoy the feature itself, but, fingers crossed, a few more will be encouraged to watch it because of our review. For those rejoining us, welcome back. Let's now look at the original review of The Grey Man. The Grey Man sees an unofficial CIA operative get a bounty placed on his head by a former colleague when he uncovers agency secrets, triggering a global manhunt by international assassins. The Grey Man is an action-packed thriller filled with A-list talent. Chris Evans is having great fun playing the unhinged villain and gets to chew the scenery every moment he's on screen. We know Ryan Gosling can play a stoic hero, and he leads the film with confidence. There are some nice moments of character development which give the film more emotional depth. Some action sequences are filmed in a frantic manner, which the audience might find disorientating, and not all effects hold up to scrutiny. However, overall, The Grey Man is a slick action flick that is worth a watch. The Grey Man's extra commentary doesn't contain any spoilers, and so, without further ado, here's some additional thoughts on the film. In some of The Grey Man's establishing shots and action sequences, the camera swings aggressively side to side as it moves, which is quite distracting. Chris Evans' antagonist is given quite a simplistic backstory, which makes his character feel like a two-dimensional cartoon. It would have made the film more interesting if he'd been given a bit more depth. There are also a handful of instances of weak dialogue, but they aren't too egregious. Not too much to add here. The Grey Man is a pretty enjoyable popcorn flick. The last film we reviewed, prior to our indie feature, was Code 8. Let's look at the original review. Code 8 tells the story of a construction worker with superpowers who falls in with a group of criminals to get money to fund treatment for his ill mother. Code 8 is a sci-fi crime drama with impressive production values, considering some of its budget came from an Indiegogo campaign. The film creates an interesting world, populated by persecuted superpowered people whose second-class status is maintained through scaremongering and a high-tech police state. Despite some intriguing ideas, the film feels quite generic, with plot threads that audiences will have seen many times over. Characters are similarly bland, with not a huge amount of depth. That's not to say the film's bad, just quite forgettable. Code 8 is worth watching for those wanting a simple sci-fi film and nothing else, but for most, it's worth a skip. Luckily, for those who hate spoilers, Code 8's extended review is spoiler-free. So, let's dig deeper into what we thought of Code 8. Code 8 has some good performances from well-known talent, including Robbie and Stephen Amell, who were also executive producers on the film. The future it depicts, in terms of surveillance and media scaremongering, feels worryingly close to our present. A sequel is in the works, and it will be interesting to see if it improves on this film. Code 8's ending feels inconclusive and is a bit weak, so a second entry may help end existing character arcs in a more satisfying manner. Now it's time to move to this side of the pond to recap the review of our bonus indie feature, Translations, after which we'll chat with its director, Keith Wilhelm Kopp. Here's our original review of Translations. Translations sees an agoraphobic translator reunite with her deceased brother's best friend, revealing secrets and passions. Translations is an understated drama which deals with the difficult subject matters of mental health and loss. The film almost entirely relies on the relationship of its two central characters, Steph and Evan. Both katemorganjones and alanemrys give believable performances and have great on-screen chemistry. There is an emotional rawness to the film that, for the vast majority of its runtime, works in its favour. Translations is a strong first feature from Keith Wilhelm Kopp that is worth a watch. Now that we're caught up, here's our interview with Director of Translations, Keith Wilhelm Kopp. I'm in conversation with Keith Wilhelm Kopp, the Director of Translations. He's very kindly spared some time for our podcast today, so welcome, Keith. So the first sort of question I'd like to ask you is sort of what got you to this point? What got you to directing Translations?
Yeah, so I've originally come from kind of Portland, Oregon, and from an early age I really got engaged with filmmaking and storytelling on screen. Coming from a working class background, seeing film on the big screen was kind of my cultural experience at like a $3 flea pit cinema, and I always knew that was kind of the passion, though I didn't really have anyone that I was related to or knew anyone in the industry. So I kind of a little bit of an odyssey on that path, but along the way, I ended up making quite a lot of short films. And, they all revolve around kind of similar themes, around kind of things about mental health, isolation, captivity, though they kind of are in different genres. And my writer and I came up with a different feature film idea, and we were shopping around Soho at the different production companies. And we had a little bit of financing from the BFI early development funding. And one of the senses that we got from that was like, guys, we like your ideas, but we really need to see a little bit more of a track record, something that's longer than a short film. And other little points kind of came together. One is, I moved to the UK 15 years ago. One of the places that I love spending the most of my time in is Wales, and specifically kind of around the Carmarthenshire area. It's beautiful. There's elements of it that remind me of my home in the Pacific Northwest. The forests and the brooks, and even small little details, things like fern plants. But also, there's this really interesting culture and language in this place. And being an American, there's a big Celtic connection, of Americans trying to connect with their past and where their heritage comes from. And so there's a lot of mention in America about Irish and Scottish heritage and culture, but there's really no mention of Welsh in pop culture in America, and I found it so unique. And I thought it deserved a space in my film, and though that was just kind of churning in the back of my mind, we had this idea of the shared experience of captivity that the whole world has recently gone through, and we were like, how could we? And I say we, with my writer, screenwriter who I collaborate quite often, Lawrence Guy. We started thinking about, okay, if we were to make a longer form film, if we are to make it off of our own back, in kind of a short span of time, what is the story that we want to tell? And we landed on this idea of this young woman who is suffering from I say agoraphobia. The correct term might be agoraphobia. But someone who has this severe anxiety about leaving a set boundary. And that's kind of the birth of our film Translations, really.
Fantastic. Well, actually, that's funny because one of the questions was going to be about the Welsh language, because obviously there is a emphasis in Wales about people learning the sort of classical language of the nation, which is good. It was just sort of the question, so you sort of answered that one already, which is very good. So the question sort of so the inspiration for the film and sort of is there anything you haven't told me so far about sort of what inspired you to tackle this subject, sort of agoraphobia and.
Yeah, I think it's kind of about the shared experience that we all came from COVID, right? So we were all in some form or another, captives of the situation that we lived in, because obviously we wanted each other's health to be well, so we kind of we moved forward in this societal restriction, and from that, I think the outpouring of honesty about everyone's mental health, I found that very interesting and very important to talk about, and as I mentioned in the past, mental health has kind of been a theme of films that I want to, make. Also specifically kind of trauma. And there is at the heart of Translations, this idea of her brother dying and what implications that has on her life, and how that has fed into her obstacles through agoraphobia. So yeah, I mean, I think that's really kind of the heart of the film and where we kind of wanted to go with that. Also, just this idea of like these little, I don't know what you want to call them, entry points or data points. I started following poets on Instagram, and that kind of fed into the the film as well. That actually Steph, she's the translator, and she is an aspiring poet, and I won't give too much away, but that is, part of this, about her journey. And I thought it was an interesting way that I've seen a lot of like specifically young, female identifying people express their emotions. And I thought when I viewed that, I was like, well, that felt a bit unique, and it felt like I haven't seen that on screen, and it felt honest and authentic. So.
Absolutely. Actually, that was one of my questions. Sort of was did the poem or the plot come first? Because of course it is so integral to the film. I don't know if you had any thoughts on that. What sort of came first?
I can't, because it was such a whirlwind. It's very hard, but I could give you an idea of how things developed, and maybe we could discover the answer together.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so that summer we were hitting up these production companies in Soho with our modern day Western feature film set in Wales called Headwater. That was funded by the BFI. So that summer that we were doing that, kind of getting those responses that were really encouraging. But hey, could you go out and prove that you could take something on larger? We got to very end of August, and we're like, okay, well, let's do this. And obviously, some of those meetings were online because we were coming out of COVID and everything. But the first lifting of lockdown was being talked about, and we were going to be able to kind of work and make films and be creative again. So that kind of put a little bit of healthy pressure on us of like, okay, well, let's do it. Let's set aside this small amount of money. because we didn't want to put the time aside to go out and seek funding for this film. Okay, so we put what little that we could scrape together. We started identifying, what kind of in-kind investment do we just have around and people are willing to help us out, and what kind of locations do we have? Once again, I mentioned about being inspired by Wales, and what areas can we shoot in. So we started, there was almost a reverse engineering process. We knew what the theme was, and we knew what the idea of captivity that we are going to explore. So we started developing this within 12 weeks. Lawrence wrote 7 drafts of the script, and during that process, we were, doing location recce's, we were casting, and when we were doing the casting process, we always knew that we kind of wanted to build the film around an actor. That was going to be the most successful, an authentic way of kind of doing this particular film. And while we did it, I remember looking at the Royal School of, the Royal Welsh School of Drama and Music, which Katemorganjones, our lead actress, came from. I remember looking at YouTube, and I just typed it in, and her monologue popped up, and it had this sense of intensity and vulnerability, and I was just like, it's her. She is Steph. And I remember showing it to Lawrence, having a discussion, and we're like, yes, this is her. So we got her involved as early as humanly possible. We started talking about the character. She was, this was actually her first film outside of graduating from drama school. And I think initially she thought it was a scam, because I think in my YouTube comments, I said, I'm an American film director based in the UK. I'm looking at doing this feature film about Wales, or set in Wales. And I think at first she was like talking to her parents, like, do you think this is authentic? And once we got past that, obviously she knew it was a real thing. Then, yeah, she collaborated quite closely with us about devising this idea. And Lawrence did a lot of great work. And kind of from that, I think certain elements were at the beginning and certain elements were kind of fed in. And because it was just this 12 weeks, I mean that from the first day we had the idea of saying we're going to do this to the last day of shooting the film. We shot the film within 9 days.
Yeah, no, that's really incredible. Yeah, I can imagine that sort of slipping into the comments and sort of going, do you fancy this project? She must have been sort of like rubbing her eyes, going, oh, is this real? It's quite an exciting, almost too good to be true moment. No, that's really interesting. What was it? That was leading me almost to So obviously you've got some really great talent within the film, and I was wondering, sort of, you found sort of your lead, but how did the rest of the cast sort of come about, and sort of what was it like working with them on set?
Yeah, so we engaged with a amazing casting director, Hannah Marie Williams, who's based in Cardiff. A lot of her work is really kind of like taken off, and she's working with top-notch cast. And I saw some shorts, and I think I had some sort of connection through someone I knew, someone she knew. So I reached out to her, and she really helped us. So kind of a lot of the cast came through her after that. Specifically, alanemrys, who plays Evan, the love interest, and someone who's deeply and equally as complex as the character of Steph. We did kind of the, in a way, the traditional thing of, Hannah brought us quite a large list of who she thought, the long list of actors she thought they could work and have the depth for this project. And, I went through and kind of had to look at, their past track record, and, how are they going to look on screen with Kate. And we auditioned, I think 5, maybe more, with them. With Kate as well, to see not only individually how are they able to take direction, but obviously what is the chemistry like with Kate, and that was really interesting. It was very helpful from the perspective of having kind of a lot of the groundwork done with Hannah. And Alan just stood out. He has this kind of like dark, brooding, mysterious thing kind of going on, which helps for this character who's gone through quite a lot. And in some ways he was bumbling through life, but he came to this point where he had to kind of face, his past, and that kind of comes out with meeting up with Steph, and I don't want to give too much away, but kind of delivering this journal of Kate's deceased brother. And yeah, I mean, working with the cast was extremely enjoyable. I mean, as I mentioned, the film was shot in 9 days. So much of this was it was a challenge. I mean, there's a lot of firsts for me personally on this film. So it's my first feature film. It's my first film working outside of the English language. So yeah, there's a lot of elements that I found challenging. But I love a good challenge, and I think because everyone was coming out of COVID and just desperate to make something creative. I mean, some productions weren't, a lot of stuff wasn't geared up to just shooting right away. So as they were kind of building up finance or, getting things ready, there was tons of crew and cast that were looking to do something. And we were able to have kind of the choice of the bunch. Yeah, I'd say the core of making sure that this film was to the standard that I wanted it to be was getting enough rehearsal time. And quite often it was like this. It was on, over the internet, which, provided some challenges. We couldn't be in the space. We couldn't block it out. I had to give a very generalized idea of what this is going to look like. But because of the measures, because we were bubbled together, actually what happened is we became very cohesive very quickly. And in fact, some of the elements, so like we only had 2 locations where we were all shooting and sleeping. There were other locations, exteriors and stuff, but for the most part it was that. So we left Kate alone at night in this amazing eco home that we were shooting in. So it kind of gave her that sense of that isolation as well. So it all fed in. And the thing is I protected 2 elements as the director, because I had to make a lot of compromises due to the fact that it was shot in 9 days and it wasn't very much an indie budget. One was, where's the camera, right? So what is that composition that we have? And the second is talking about those motivations and those obstacles with my cast before we shot. No matter how bad time got, those things had to be sealed down. Yeah, and I think that protected us and allowed us to create the
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was the sort of watching the film, it was sort of looking at sort of how difficult to shoot in that environment is, to shoot in sort of in a house sort of all in one go. So I mean that sort of must have influenced sort of your visual choices in the film. I know obviously the film is in black and white. Was there sort of a reasoning behind that sort of use, and obviously the using of rather than using say a very overtly cramp aspect, you've chosen sort of to use the full screen width. So I mean, sort of talk me through the sort of the visual choices.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, everything kind of builds this visual metaphor of she is in this emotional cage. Like she's not even allowed color in her existence, and she has to kind of break from that. Within that house, one of the reasons that we chose this space is because though it is cramped, there's all these angles where we have, they have this beautiful pillar that was built in. It was actually a tree that used to be there before they started building the environment. And there's so many frames that I was able to put her in this box to where the audience is kind of seeing it from her perspective in a way, and she is having to fight to, break out of that box. So we had all of these interesting angles, and I wanted it to feel kind of suffocated, like she felt, whether it's there's that physical boundary with the gate outside, there's as I mentioned, the log, which we utilize within. We are tight. There's a lot of tight frames within this. That's not just because we are in a short, small space, but it's, I wanted you to feel as agoraphobic as Steph did within that. Also, speaking to the black and white, though this film is kind of heavy, there's moments of heaviness, it's actually kind of positive and light. The visual references we went for with black and white are more of like, it's not high contrast. It's actually kind of you have milky whites and blacks. And I like that because there is a little bit of lightness to the black and white, if that makes sense, within that dynamic range. A reference for me on this film was definitely something like Francis Ha, and you could actually see a little bit of that as well. So yeah, and the same thing kind of with sound. We've only sealed down the 5.1 audio mix quite recently, and a lot of those sounds kind of play into the environment and also her character journey.
Yeah, no, I think it's very true that it's sort of something I agree that there is a softness. It's almost like you almost want to say sort of almost grayscale rather than black and white, because there isn't that harshness that's sort of super bright and super dark. It's that sort of, there's a sort of, I don't know, painting wise, like a gentle softness to it rather than, as you say, a harshness. Um, I couldn't help but notice that both in your film Gage and in this, you obviously start with a monologue, a sort of almost on stage, quite literally engage, and here sort of more in the mind. Is that something that was sort of specific to these two films, or something that you're wanting to carry forward throughout your next sort of pieces of work?
I think sometimes these things aren't necessarily planned, but they do have a connection. I'm really, I look forward to a film that I'm dealing with tons of characters, an ensemble film, because I think that would be quite tricky in that. I'm not saying you couldn't, but I think with a lot of these films, perspective is so close to protagonist that like I just want that audience to feel like they are literally on that journey with that particular character. You mentioned the circus announcer with Gage. From my perspective, when I put that on there, that's in his head. Though there is, that's based on a true story, and though the circus bit is a little bit of myth, it's not as particularly accurate. The way that I shot that was more about, you're entering this almost fantastical journey, even though it has a solid, based on a true story foundation. If that makes sense. But yeah, the monologue and going with the translations, the poem, there is this element of, I'm offering you this bit of intimacy, this little bit of private perspective.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it must have been quite exciting being mentored by sort of a very large director. And now I'm gonna butcher pronunciation. Gus Van Sant obviously helped you with that. What was it like working with that director?
Gus is a master, and he's an interesting master in that his films. You could watch a Quentin Tarantino film, for instance, or a Wes Anderson film, or a Kelly Reichardt film, to some degree, and you could see the tone have similar elements on every picture that they have kind of done. There's a certain approach to the visuals or the material that kind of screams, hey, I'm behind the lens. Gus is a little bit different. He is a great experimenter. His early films, so he as a filmmaker is really important to me personally, because I'm from where he kind of lived for most of his life, from Portland, the Portland, Oregon area. And his early films, things like Drugstore Cowboy, My Own Private Idaho, they're actually like odes to old Portland, like what I imagine that city to be, late 80s, early 90s, when my family first moved there. But yeah, as far as his approach, every single film has a little bit of a different feel to to his work. And when he agreed to be my mentor, there was a lot of we had a lot of conversations regarding script and also environment on set, like how certain things. When I was coming out of film school, when I was going to shoot Gage, was like, maybe these elements weren't talked about in film school, but like, how do you want the set to feel actually has a tonal influence on what is seen on screen. Also, he gave me some great advice about like how to get reaction shots on set. If you take a dialogue scene and you actually get the actors to act out the whole thing just with emotional beats and no dialogue, you're going to get a great reaction shot. If an actor's not used to it, it might be kind of an awkward thing for them, but maybe awkward's what you're going for. Maybe that's what you need. As the actors become more used to this approach, you get kind of interesting emotional beats within a take. So yeah, so Gus was very helpful, and he's still making amazing work. In fact, I think there's a TV show coming out. It's coming out soon. it's going to be amazing. I really look forward to it.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Right, so with that in mind, what have we got? Okay, I've completely forgotten about Zoom time limits. Right, so what was I going to say? So obviously you're moving on to a different stage of the film. You're in post production. You're going for screenings. Sort of, I was interested to hear sort of if you were able to speak to yourself prior to the production starting. Was there anything you tell yourself now that you sort of are towards the end of finishing the film?
Yes, I think I would definitely have a post-production supervisor. So I didn't on this particular production. I knew that I was going to be heavily involved with, managing that side of things. But because I didn't have my post team in place when we started shooting, there's particular challenges in post that I wish I had an external person having the foresight of certain elements going, hey, we should make sure that, we have these audio files in a particular, format, or, you should be thinking already about the cinema, release, all this type of stuff. So yeah, I mean, currently we are in, we're about to have our cinema release come up here pretty soon. Our first day is the 2nd of June in Wales. And yeah, there's a lot of it where I'm still managing, with getting things ready for DCPs. And so much of kind of distribution, I chose self-distribution in the end for the UK release, at least for the cinema release, because I wanted to learn more. I wanted to learn more about the process. But that being said, while that happens, you already have to start thinking about who the streamer is. And if you're going to have a North American release, who's going to be managing that? And are you going to be using a distributor, or you can do it yourself? So there's all these kind of things that are outside, and I chose to produce this film to a degree as well for control. I'm not sure if I'll be doing that again. I love the process of directing. I produce because it sometimes affords me that opportunity. And yeah, I think I'm going to be investing more energy and collaboration with producers in the future. But yeah, like I said, what it's done for me this time is it's taught me a lot, even if it is to appreciate people that their sole job is distribution or production or.
No, that's really interesting. I mean, sort of in that learning space. In terms of screenings, obviously there's part of it to get the film out there. But are you looking to learn anything else from the screenings? Sort of, is it audience reaction? Are there certain tweaks that you sort of might want to do to the film? Or is it just purely publicity speaking?
Yeah, I mean, I'm treating the cinema release as the big release. So there's like this element of catharsis for a film that I've almost been working on for 3 years. So like every film you live with for the entire career, your entire life. So I'm never going to get rid of translations. It will always be a part of who I am. And I think like, I reached out to a producer who's worked with Gus and several other kind of art house directors from Portland, just to get his advice. And like, he was telling me about another filmmaker that he works with, who I won't name, but like, they've done very well for themselves. And like, they're still distributing a film that they made 30 years ago. So that you never get rid of this, but you're still working. But I guess what I'm hoping for is a stopping point to where this could go lower on the priority list, and I could be working on the 3 other films which I'm currently developing. So there's that. There is. I'm hoping to see if there is a space for independent film within a cinema release in the United Kingdom anymore. We have these cinemas signed up, and they are really supportive, and I'm so super excited about this. But there is the thing of like, it's kind of an interesting time for film, and we need to see like, is there going to be an eco space for us to communally enjoy films, at least of a lower budget nature, together in cinemas. And I'm curious what the answer of that is. I think it's yes. I think that the help and the volunteers that we've had so far in the cinemas and the film bookers who have all they've taken a risk on us because they enjoy the film or they like the concept behind it. And yeah, I guess I'm sure the sound mixer and the color gradist and other people don't want to hear that I'll tweak anything. But I mean, if there was anything to come out of these screenings that I think I could do to improve the film, most certainly I will do that. It most likely will be improving it for the platform streaming release as opposed to theatrical release. But also just to reach out to the community that like this audience that I've made, you always make a film for yourself, but you do realize that there is an audience and you want people to enjoy it. So I'm really excited to take this to the cinemas. I'm excited to take it to Wales. I am an American that fell in love with Wales, and though we're very much in one specific place from the majority of the film, it is my love letter to Wales.
Absolutely. So, talking about up and coming, maybe you could give us a sort of whistle-stop tour through your sort of what's currently in development for you and your future.
Yeah. So I'm looking to work again with my long-term writer, Lawrence Guy. We have 3 feature films currently in the pipeline. We have this phenomenal idea for like a Christmas like family comedy drama. And we are still working on Headwater, which is the modern day Welsh Western. That has a bigger budget. So we're kind of hoping off of the back of Translations, or if not Translations, maybe the next picture, to start working with a production company about shooting that. It's set kind of in West Wales, and we're looking forward to kind of possibly attaching some phenomenal talents, both named and maybe unnamed as well. And also we're working on a project potentially for S4 to pitch to S4C, so the Welsh language broadcaster. And I'm on a personal journey. Like I wouldn't say I'm doing that well, but I'm trying to learn Welsh, and I can see further productions having more and more Welsh language in them.
Well, I'm sure S4C will love that. They're very eager for Welsh language programming, and rightly so. I guess the last thing to talk about is obviously where people can see the film. Obviously, there's a list of your screenings up on the website that's coming out, and I don't know what's your plan for streaming, etc. I don't know. Are you sort of in discussion with that? Is it what platforms are you sort of thinking about that, and when, as it were?
Yeah. So currently we're in discussion. I can't really give a confirmation of where it will be seen yet on streaming platforms. But I will say that I think there's enough of interest that it will definitely happen. As you mentioned, there is a list of screenings. You can see it on the website here with really good films. You could look at the tickets from Linktree/translations movie. That's Linktree/translations movie, or my personal website, kwkopp.com. I look forward to it. Thank you so much, and I hope tons of people will come out.
Yeah, no, that's very exciting. Well, thank you for coming on today. I think we might have to do a double call because there's a time limit just to say our goodbyes off screen. But thank you very much to Keith Wilhelm Kopp, director of Translations. It's been fantastic talking to you and very interesting. And I'll put some information about where to go and see the film and links, etc., so you can check out his film Translations. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Pleasure to be on. Thank you.
Wonderful to have Keith on the podcast. We wish him the best of luck with the release of Translations. Links to his website and how to see the film are in this podcast's description. Now it's time to look forward to some of June's new releases. Elemental follows Ember and Wade in Element City, a place where fire, water, air and earth residents live together. Disney Pixar's world looks fun and visually engaging, with some enjoyable visual jokes from characters of different elements interacting with each other. It will be interesting to see if this film can make itself feel original while exploring the well-trodden narrative of dealing with parental expectation and finding your own way. Transformers: Rise of the Beasts sees Noah, Elena and the Autobots team up against a new nemesis who wishes to destroy the Earth. It's another Transformers movie, so if you've seen any of the others, you'll know what to expect. The idea of animal Transformers is promising, and he is hoping the idea makes for some exciting action scenes. Asteroid City sees the itinerary of a junior stargazer convention get interrupted by world-changing events. Kooky characters, typical of Wes Anderson's work, seem like they are going to deliver plenty of laughs. Its cinematography looks stunning, with its 1950s desert setting allowing the director's visual style to stretch its legs in a new locale. I'm sure fans of Wes Anderson are already excited about this new feature. Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny sees our titular hero race against time to discover an artifact that can change the course of history. After Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, 15 years ago, most thought the series was over, but here it is, resurrected again. It appears like it is trying to recapture the sense of adventure of previous entries with an intriguing time-travelling artifact. This film will either prove there's still life in this franchise, or that it was better left unrevived after 2008's outing. Ruby Gillman, teenage Kraken, tells the story of a shy adolescent who learns that she comes from a fabled royal family of sea krakens with a duty to protect the world's oceans from the power-hungry mermaids. The film subverts the notion that krakens are monsters and mermaids are beloved to create a unique take on the teenager wanting to fit in storyline. It will not be lost on anyone that one of its characters pays a striking resemblance to a famous animated mermaid whose film just got a remake. This new DreamWorks movie feels fresh in a sea, pun intended, of remakes from the House of Mouse. Well, that's it for this episode of the Really Good Films podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. If you want more from Really Good Films, don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook and YouTube. We're at Really Good Films on all of these platforms. And of course, subscribe to the podcast too on Spotify and Amazon Music. We can't wait to review more films for you soon.